All right, fellow Toastmasters, thank you so much for coming this morning. We are happy to see you and happy to have you participate as presenters for some of our upcoming TLIs. Getting us started and leading our meeting this morning is the chair of our education committee, distinguished Toastmaster Rachel Assinion. Please welcome her.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to talk about the Train the Trainer today. This is our second Train the Trainer session, and I just wanted to welcome you all and thank you for participating in whatever capacity you volunteered for. Most of us have signed up to be a trainer. I do know that we have some other folks that have joined us that are just interested in knowing more about learning and training and how all of that works. So welcome one and all. This is going to be a very interactive session, as all training sessions should be. So be prepared to unmute yourselves. You'll probably hear one of us say, "You're on mute," because that is the phrase that pays these days. So let's talk a little bit about what the expectation is. Our main expectation is to have a growth mindset. Having a growth mindset was some of the work that Carol Dweck did several years ago. And she spent her time thinking about what does it take for anybody to be successful in anything. And she found that if you're open to growth, that is going to propel you farther forward than your smarts, your IQ, or your level of resources. And Angela has the book right there on mindset by Carol Dweck. Thank you for that, Angela. So that's one of the things that we are really thinking about in terms of why we're doing a couple sessions on Train the Trainer and why we want to have a continuous support for anybody who wants to increase their skill set when it comes to training. So I want to open the floor to you, and let's start talking about good sessions and poor sessions. So let's talk about some of the poor sessions first. It's easier to remember some of the negatives, as Yelp will tell you and Google reviews will tell you. It's easier for us to complain about stuff. So let's go there first. Tell me, in your own experiences, what have been some elements of a poor session? Why didn't it go so well? Something that you attended, perhaps. Fred, kick us off.
Two things. I want to say an unprepared presenter and one that, if using PowerPoints, reads off of every single slide verbatim.
You're like touching my heart here. Yes, absolutely. Unpreparedness. That is really difficult because as you're watching them figure out all of their thoughts, they're kind of like a squirrel in the road. It's like, wow, this is like a train wreck unfolding right in front of my eyes. Woof. And the whole reading thing. Yeah, I actually have that as one of my bullet points to talk about today. Felicia and I had a really lively debate about to slide or not to slide. And one of the things that people fall into with slides is that they put too many words on a slide and it turns into story hour. And more times than not, your audience knows how to read. But it's also a test of their vision. It turns into a vision exam. Like, it's QAT. I don't know what that last letter is. It's like, you know what? Okay, all right. Slides are great to have a placeholder. Slides are great to have main points. It's called PowerPoint, not Power Story, Power Dissertation. It's not any of that. All right, so let's hear from some others. Poor sessions that you've attended. What did that look like? Julie, please.
When the instructor wants to tell us everything he or she knows, so we don't have time to even voice what we want to know.
Yeah. And that's important because you came looking for something. Absolutely. So while we're on that topic, I would like to hear from you in the chat. What do you want to get out of today's session? So I want to make sure that I hit on those things. Let's hear from someone else, a very poor session, and then we'll move on to the good ones. Nancy, please.
I just hooked my computer back up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Wasn't sure I had everything hooked up right, and then it went to run Windows updates and everything. I attended a session where the instructor played a game, and the game actually was Jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
And people who had no knowledge of the topic had no way, there was no way they could win, could know the answers, because, with Jeopardy, you give the answers and then the question is to be asked. And I just thought it was very unfair to people who had not ever had any exposure to that topic. And then when questions were asked, there was no time to give answers to the questions. So it was like, here's my email address, email me the questions.
Wow. Yeah. And just like Julie said too, like we want to build in some time so people can get what they came for. Absolutely. You touched on something really important that I have, that I wanted to make mention today also, Nancy, is that you have to start at a certain level so everybody can follow. And if you can find the lowest common denominator of the group, like the lowest level of knowledge, and build on it, then you know that people are going to follow you from start to finish. There is a theory in learning that we refer to as the Schema Theory, and it really does have to do with the schematic in your brain. If you have prior knowledge to something and you can connect that person to that prior knowledge, those neurons in the brain are going to be firing. If you connect to something obscure that people don't already know, neurons are not firing. And that's not a good thing. You want to see the wheels turning in people's faces. And in some cases, it does generate some smoke out of the ears, but that's okay too. At least you know that you've got them thinking, you've got them engaged, and they are with you. So schema theory. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I'd be happy to geek out with any of you on all of these learning theories at some other time. So let's move on to the positive. What are some fantastic elements in a session that you were like, wow, this made for a really great workshop. It was a great session. Let's hear some positives. Fred, please.
Audience engagement.
Engagement.
Audience engagement, yes. Engaging with the audience, letting them participate in like being part of the presentation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So there was a man by the name of Malcolm Knowles who did a lot of learning theory for adults. And one of the things that he said was that people come to the session with knowledge and experience. And if you can facilitate a conversation where you're inviting your group to contribute for the greater good of others, and that they can participate, they get some intrinsic value from that. You're like, wow, I was able to give to others. And that's a really important element as well. In my industry, which is learning and development, we have two extremes. We have the sage on the stage. This is the person who just knows everything. They're pontificating. They're behind the lectern. They're just spouting off all the knowledge that they know. And anytime a question is asked, they take charge to answer the question. But on the opposite side of that spectrum is the guide on the side. And this is the person who facilitates that engagement. They invite people in to participate. So one of the resources that I have for you, and I'll put this in the chat, are a bunch of flashcards for you to start thinking about how is it that I want to engage with people, and how can I do things online versus in person, because it does have some elements of that as well. But thinking about the session that I'm doing, do I look more like the guide on the side or the sage on the stage? Like where am I there? And there's some flashcards that you can look front and back and figure out, what do I want to look like and what did my session actually look like? Okay, let's hear from somebody else about a positive, fantastic experience that you've seen in a session. Julie, please.
Well, I don't want to sound such an expert, but I have been teaching Train the Trainer for Northrop Grumman for decades. And the best sessions were when we actually divided the session into two halves. One of them was the discussion elements, what you are talking about. And the other half was when the people had to prove that they can actually stand up and do something with the material that they were going to teach. And one of the most successful was a finance training. The finance experts had to teach their coworkers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, applicable real life scenarios that you can put this stuff to work right away. It could be a tool, like, here's a new tool to use. It could be a matrix or rubric or chart. It can also be a particular technique or a method, something that we can put together right away. So we've already talked about a few of those, like having a growth mindset, schema theory. We talked a little bit about making sure that you facilitate a discussion where we can have people participate and contribute. So we've already been talking about some applicable things, which is really the main point of this. One of the things that we're not going to talk about today is all of the Toastmaster officer role stuff. While that is important, and I am going to provide some links and some content for it, we're not going to spend as much time on it, because if you're stepping up to do an officer role at TLI, you know the role. There's not much I can tell you about that. But what we're looking for is, how do I take my knowledge of the role and then couch it in some of these fantastic positive experiences with the methods, with the techniques, to make the session engaging, to make it interactive, and to make it really intriguing for the people who are there. So am I going to look like the guide on the side, or am I going to look like the sage on the stage? And there's elements of both sometimes. Speaking of officer training, you have to have a reasonable expectation for your participants. If you have served as, let's say, secretary for several years, and this is a first-time secretary Toastmaster, you can't expect them to rise to your level of knowledge just as a result of your 40-minute session plus Q&A. It's unreasonable. It takes time, it takes experience, it takes application, it takes mentorship, it takes all of those things. So what we want to do in this particular session is to cover the responsibilities of the role. And this can be a very interactive way. So instead of me, like Fred said, putting that slide up and just saying, here's all the things that you need to know, and then reading off every single slide as if my participants can't read, How can we convey that same information? That's a question for the group. How do we get it out there in an interactive way?
I have a comment.
Please.
I know what I like to do. I like to use pictures, and this is something that I learned from somebody else. Rather than words, put a picture on the slide and let the picture generate the conversation.
Absolutely. Yes. Fred, you have your hand raised.
Yes. Well, you're talking about all the text on there, reading off of it. Why don't we use the audience engagement and maybe have people talk about what they see on the screen or some of those words that they see? That way we know they're comprehending what A, we're presenting, and B, what they're seeing in front of them.
Absolutely. You can use some of those slides. And just like Fred said too, I want to add on to what he said. If you have a list of the responsibilities, you can ask the experienced people, where do you spend most of your time? And that will help the new people understand, oh, I actually spend most of my time doing meeting minutes, or I spend most of my time over here. And that gives them a different expectation, not just these are all roles and they are all to be shared in an equal amount of time, but it helps them figure out how to distribute their time given each of the roles. So what's another way that we can get other people to interact talking about the responsibilities of the role?
You can ask, which one do you like the most and which one do you have the most difficulty with?
Yeah. And then we can do a follow-up on that. Hey, who has a solution for this? Does anybody have a template? Does anybody have a method? Does anybody have some sort of organization tool that you use to do this? If you decide to go with no slides, which is fine, that's completely up to you, your comfort level as a presenter, you can also just throw the question out to the group. Hey, what are the responsibilities of this particular role? And have people contribute. You're going to have a mixed group of extremely experienced, I've been a secretary for 30-year type, and then you're going to have some folks that this is their first time ever being an officer, and you're going to have everybody in between. So be the guide on the side and let them do some of the heavy lifting, because they have just as much to contribute and they can participate, and then we make it interactive. The roles and responsibilities of the officer role, I'm going to put a link right into the chat here. So these materials, what I have found is that most of them are leaning a little towards 55 minutes for the session. And the fun thing about that is we really only have about 40 minutes when it comes to a few minutes to get the session started with your introduction. And then you have your session where you're talking about some of the roles and responsibilities. And then you may finish off with a Q&A. And then we have about a 10-minute passing time to get to the next breakout room. So the meat and potatoes is really about 40 minutes. So if you're using the Toastmasters content, just know that you probably won't get through all of the content unless you're doing what Fred observed in one of his sessions where somebody's just reading off all the slides. It's like boom, 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 boom. I can go through all of this. And you just read everyone a story and they're all asleep. So good for you. That's how that went. I already know, especially if you're going to do a session after lunch. Those are the worst sessions because people are like, I'm ready for a nap. It can be a tricky audience at that point, but you can manipulate the PowerPoints that are provided by Toastmasters International. They are a PPTS file, which means when you open it, it goes straight into presentation mode, but you can rename the file extension to PPTX, and that will give you the ability to edit those. And if you have any questions on that and you need my help in that, please reach out. I'd be happy to help you and work through some of those techie sort of things. Very important. So as we've talked about guide on the side, we've talked about sage on the stage. We've also talked about a little bit of Malcolm Knowles and adult learning theory. And we've also covered some things about Carol Dweck's growth mindset. So there's so many different resources that we have so far. So I'm going to put a link in the chat, and then Nancy, go ahead and make your comment, please.
I have a question about modifying the slides. I know that Toastmasters has some fairly stringent standards. So can you speak a little to the extent to which we are allowed to make modifications to those slides?
That's a great question. So we have to stay within the Toastmasters branding. So that's one of the things that we cannot manipulate on there. You can, but you shouldn't. So if your favorite color is purple, Becky, I'm looking at you, you can't make your slides purple. As much as we would love to have a different color scheme that really makes your heart sing, that's one of the things that we cannot do. One thing I recommend is using the hide slide feature. And when you have the whole list of slides on the left side, and then you've got like your main slide that you're looking at in the middle, you can right click over any of those slides and hide it. And this way you can condense the amount of content. One thing that's awkward in a session that I've seen is that people will flip through their slides and nope, I don't need that one. Nope, I don't need that one. Nope, I don't need that one. It's like, you know, like keep your inner dialogue inner. So look at them ahead of time and choose what is the main goal of this particular session. And what I'm suggesting is like, let's just stay where the responsibilities are. And there are several slides that say before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. If you want to keep that organization, you are welcome to. If you want to just have a high level, you can do that as well. So I wouldn't suggest adding a lot of content. I would suggest hiding some of those slides and condensing it. But then also provide your contact information. Maybe you want to add a slide at the end and say, I can serve as a mentor for you. If you have additional questions, which you probably will, please reach out. I'd be happy to provide guidance. So adding a contact slide is really important too. Does anybody else have any comments about what to add, what to subtract, some experience that you all have had with the TI materials? Vicki, please.
Could have used the hand raise icon thing, but you know, I got two here. I wanted to just ask and point out that because we're going to have a diverse audience, you know, some people very experienced and some brand new, that isn't it important to speak to the person with, say, the least, make sure your content hits the least person with the least knowledge. Sometimes we tend as trainers to want to shine, and so we speak to the people out there that we know are experienced, we include them all in, and providing that high level training may actually lose some of those people who are new, who just haven't even started. So would it be a good idea maybe to ask ahead of time how many of you, or put how many years you've been, or how many times you've served in this role, so you have a sense of what your audience is composed of, or something along those lines?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Nancy, please.
In conjunction with what Vicki has said, because I find that when I'm in a session that I'm essentially forced to be in, and I know the material already, I'm bored. But I'm there because I want to do whatever it is that I've asked to do. And in order to do it, I'm required to participate in this. So I think it's important that we also try to engage those, we have to engage everybody. And because we know that we have people at all ends, at both ends of the spectrum and in the middle, one of the things that I typically do when I teach anything is announce that I am going to start as though no one knows anything, which in a way kind of smooths the feathers of those people who know a lot and keeps them from thinking that you're talking down to them. And, you know, if everybody is experienced, then that's one thing. But if you have people at all ends of the spectrum, then it's important to try to address everybody. And also to state that if I have said something to those of you who have not, who are not familiar with this concept, please feel free to ask questions, and then allow those who have more experience to answer the questions. That engages them, that makes them feel a part of.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's fair game to set the level at, hey, we have a broad spectrum of experience here and everybody's in a different place. So we're going to start here and then we're going to go here. And that helps people anticipate what's going to be coming. Julie, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to say, combining what Vicky and Nancy were saying, I think that it's a good idea to actually learn about your audience, get to know your audience, and upfront say, wow, I have a lot of co-facilitators here, so pay attention because I'm going to ask you to answer the question, so I don't have to be always the expert.
That's right. And that's a great principle for the guide on the side, like what we're talking about. Right. You can also start your session asking people, how many years have you been a Toastmaster? How many times have you served in this role? And have them use the chat or something like that. Probably won't allow you to use the poll function because you're not the owner of the Zoom account. But if you're doing your own session on your own Zoom account, you can set up a poll even and have the questions posted there too. And that way everyone can see collectively what those responses are. That's a great way to do it. There are some resources out there that you can embed into your slides, like Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, and Mentimeter, and I'll put those names in the chat, where you can add elements of polling and surveys, and they can do word clouds and lots of other things that you can make it interactive. That goes back to what Nancy was talking about earlier, what to add to slides and what not to add to slides. That really adds another element of interaction. Angela.
I almost forgot what I was going to say. Okay. When I go to these trainings, I get out sometimes and I'm like, I have no idea what to do. This job is going to be so overwhelming because I don't know what to do. It was so complex, the training, that it was too much. So I'm training VPE because that's the only position I've ever served. I want to make it simple. And I really wish I had time to say, okay, what these VPEs that have been in it for a while, what is it that you discovered that nobody told you about? Because I discovered a lot that nobody told me about and it overwhelmed me. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I want to make it so simple that they feel like they can do it and they walk away like, I got this. Okay, I know what to do. Mm-hmm. And then I want the experienced ones to step in and say, what did you learn that nobody told you about?
Yes.
Am I allowed to just go that way with it? I don't want it to turn into a rant session, but I want these new people to realize, you know, there's a lot to being VPE. Mm-hmm. And I think I went to Becky's session one time and she said VPE was the heart. And I was like, that's right, we're the heart. But nobody knows that we're the heart, but we're the heart. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's what I'm going to do with the two sessions I'm going to work with. It's just I don't want it to turn into a rant session. That's the only thing. Because I really feel like VPEs really want to rant because it was overwhelming. So, mm-hmm. But I just want to keep it simple. I don't want to make it difficult for these people because that's how I felt with some of the sessions I've been to in the past. It was just too complicated. Mm-hmm. I walked
Absolutely.
away more confused than when I went in. So I want to just keep it simple.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. I really do. Vicky has her hand raised, and then I have a question in the chat I want to address after she makes her comment.
I think I so agree with what you're saying. I just wanted to say that it's really important to provide be organized and provide basic tools. You know, we want them to go away with something. Here's the basic things, and also to emphasize that we didn't have advanced training for this position. We are all learning as we're going. Some of us are more skilled, more experienced because of either our profession or we've served, and others are brand new. But that's the thing that's great about Toastmasters, is that we are able to learn while doing. So although, you know, you were talking about, right, the Vice President of Education is the heart, but it's an opportunity for you to continue to add knowledge and to grow with the job. And each time you do it, you are better and better, and you're learning more and more tools that you can apply even in other roles. So, you know, I think taking advantage of the personal training opportunity that Toastmasters provides is a really great way to overcome that sense of overwhelming and it's too much for me to do, because nobody's expecting you to do everything all at once the very first moment you start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Marie, is your comment related to Vicky's?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Just a real quick point about being overwhelmed with a position. If you have experienced people on the call, you can suggest perhaps that your newer people connect with your experienced people and use that as a mentoring situation, because I know that helped me tremendously, or even connect with the previous person in their club. So just that there's that personal connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I advocate for adding a contact slide at the end of your slides, or putting your contact information into the chat, because you want to be able to continue that conversation. That the expectation needs to be set that just because you came to the session doesn't make you an expert now. Like, there's an entire concept called scaffolding. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier with schema theory. Schema theory is finding the prior knowledge that we can build upon, and scaffolding takes it one step further. If you think about a building that is being resurfaced, maybe it's covered in pollution or something like that, and there's the scaffold that goes around that construction area, it gives the people working on the building the ability to go up and go down and hit all of the different levels. But the scaffold, when you're building it, starts at the bottom, and then you're building up, and that gives you the ability to go up and down. Scaffolds aren't started from the top. They're started from the bottom. So that's one of the things that as presenters, we have to really think about, that we start at the bottom and then we keep building on top. And then we have this culmination where we have walked away with some ideas, new impressions, maybe some tools, maybe some techniques, and we walk away with something not at the expert level, but it gives us something to apply. So the comment in the question in the chat I want to address is something I said earlier about, if you're using your own account, then you can use the polling feature. For TLI, we're using the district's account, so we won't be able to engage all of those features because we've got the main Zoom room, and then all of the sessions will take place in the breakout room. So you can't use your own account for TLI, but for some of the elective sessions, we're going to be seeing different learning opportunities throughout the year, and I'm building that calendar now, that you can use your own account if you like, and then that gives you the ability to use the polling feature and all of the other goodies that are in there. Deb, go ahead.
In regard to that, I'm assuming I had come in late, that somebody wanted to use the polling during their teaching session. Why not take the opportunity to create the poll ahead of time using Google Forms if you have a Google account, and then you can share it and poll that way? And because you have taught me, I know you're able to, but I know you are busy. So I would volunteer my assistance for anybody who'd want to create a poll of that fashion for their room.
Yeah, so that's one more resource to add to our list. We mentioned Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, Mentimeter. You can do Google Forms. You can even do Microsoft Forms, any of those that you would contain ahead of time, and then give the ability to do some interactive polling that way. Fred had mentioned in the chat that he used Mentimeter before. It can be added to Zoom, which is a really cool feature, or you can build your slides over in Mentimeter and then just share it that way. One really interesting thing about Mentimeter is that if you give somebody a link or a code or a QR code, that they can follow along on their own device the entire time, and it advances the slides on their device as well. And every time there's a new interactive element on there, it's a word cloud, it's a survey, it's, you know, a question, like a knowledge check type question, they'll just keep answering right on their device as your session moves forward. So it's a little bit more of an advanced technique, but just as Deb said, she's happy to provide guidance on Google Forms, and I'm happy to provide guidance on any of these other techniques as well. So link I'm going to repost into the chat. I know I've had a lot of people come in at different times. This is a fantastic resource from Toastmasters International, and it talks about the training basics. It talks about some of the things that we've talked about already with the adult learning principles. We mentioned Malcolm Knowles, that's the source of their content. I don't think they actually cite him in there. I didn't see it anyway, could be. But some things to think about with the learners, setting the expectations that you're not going to be an expert as a result of this. This is just kicking off the year to give you an idea so you can chart your course to continue learning. Having that growth mindset, being open is going to be really important. And then finally, some of the things to think about to be interactive with your audience. I want to take us over to another document that I'd like to share. One of the things that we're implementing this year as an option, this is not a requirement, but an option, is an evaluation for trainers. Now, those of you who do these sessions using a pathways evaluation, that's wonderful. Ask somebody to evaluate your session using a pathways project. For those of you who want to really increase your training skill set and build that acumen, which some of you said at the beginning of the session of what you want to get out, I am offering this evaluation specifically about training technique. You can use this in a couple different ways. The first way is you can critique yourself, critique, not criticize. You can critique yourself and see how well you did in all of the different categories listed in the evaluation. Something else that you can do is you can ask me, and I can have somebody on my team, if it's not me, to come into your session and give you an evaluation on how well it went from a training standpoint. It's up to you. I'm offering this as an additional layer of support for this year. Some of you said earlier in the chat that you want to improve your training skills, how to engage audiences, not just speaking at them, but actually engaging in training and learning, creative ways to improve the discussion, getting the latest and the best advice, and all of the other things that you said earlier. So I am available to you to help you in this area. For those of you who don't know me, I started teaching over 20 years ago in a school setting. I was a school teacher, and then I moved over to corporate learning, and I've been in classrooms all the time for 20 some years. So this is what I do for a living, and I'm happy to come alongside and have that discussion. it is open for you. Vicki has a challenge for all of you concerning this evaluation though, and I'm going to invite her to talk about that.
Well, as we all know, evaluation is indeed the heart of the Toastmasters program. That's what we get right away. We're interested in always getting feedback on how we did, suggestions for improvement. That's probably the most important thing. Even those of us that are the most seasoned, you know what, we enjoy a little bit saying, oh, it was perfect, it was, but what we really like are those suggestions, the things that help us improve. What could I have done better or differently that might have made the audience engage more? So we want to make sure we do that all the time. You will be asked, your moderators will be asked to upload in the chat a general evaluation of the session. There'll be a jot form that they can go to do the general evaluation that we typically have. But this particular evaluation that Rachel is throwing out to all of us to use is available for those of us that want to evaluate the sessions and the presenters. We want to have quality training. We want to make sure everything's good. Some of that evaluation may be done on the recording because we're going to be recording your session. And you may be asked, because of the limited, we have to break out rooms and there's limited drive space on the person that has to download that. You may be asked to choose, do you want your first session or second session recorded if they can only do one? So think about that a little bit. But so we may be looking at the recordings in terms of being able to use this tool. But most importantly is you are participating right now and listening to a trainer who's doing a session. How's she doing? She would like your feedback. We would all like to see your feedback. So take that tool if you don't mind and complete it based on your assessment of how Rachel is doing with this particular session, and send it to me or even send it to her. We're not shy. And we enjoy that process. So I encourage you to take the challenge and do the same thing she's offering to do for you. Thank you.
And I can tell you throughout my career, I've had some real tough evaluators that have challenged me to grow. And that's where that growth mindset comes back into play, is be open. This isn't a requirement. This is simply extra support for you if you were looking to increase your training skill set. So take the opportunity to practice the tool and evaluate me. I'd love it. Julie, please.
Yes. I would like to offer my services as well, because I would be delighted to evaluate any of you at any time. My credentials are the same as Rachel's. I was a high school teacher, and then I came to America and I was a trainer at Intel and Northrop Grumman for 200 years. And I did do nothing else except training and training and training and train the trainer. Now, I have attended Rachel's session because she knows the ins and outs of the 21st century, because I was mostly in the previous century. What I discovered was, and I can say it from my own personal experience when I was doing a training in one of the clubs, that the final evaluation was saying all the other trainer got all 5s except Julie. Well, I did tell them, please don't give me all 5s, because 3 is what I'm expecting. But everybody feels like obligated to be nice to the trainer and circle the 5 instead of giving real juicy feedback for improvement. That's our goal, to improve. Of course, Angela is wonderful, and I heard her speak, and she has not as much to improve as a beginner, but she wants to improve. Even Susan wants to improve. So let's not give all 5s to everybody.
Thank you, Julie. So between Julie and I, we have 220 years of experience. And Vicki also has a great deal of experience, but I'm not going to add on to the number. Just, I mean, we might be looking at several centuries here now, because we've got so much experience that it's helpful to everyone. I started my career as a high school teacher, as I said, and it wasn't so much the principals and the assistant principals that gave me valuable feedback. It was the students themselves, because if things run off the rails in the classroom, high school kids, they'll tell you. They will tell you right then and there, like, hey, you know, this is not working for us. I don't know what activity this is that you put together, but this is not working for us. Whew, that is a tough place to cut your teeth as a trainer, but it's made me stronger, because instead of shutting them down, like, you are a minor, you have nothing to say here, I decided to take the growth mindset path and just say, hey, yeah, let's talk about that. What would you do in this place? And they've had some great ideas, and we've got ourselves back on track because they just took it. And yes, Nancy, I agree. I did some middle school teaching as well. Never again. It was horrendous. Oh yeah, it was terrible, terrible. So this is an opportunity for you if you want to increase your training skill set, that I offer from me and my team, that we are happy to assist in this way and bring some additional evaluation to your session. I'm going to drop that into the chat as well. I know I've got people joining at different times and stuff here too. So it is not required, but it is an opportunity to receive some really valuable feedback as you're growing as a trainer. One of the links I put in there earlier that was about the training basics has a Venn diagram of what is a speaker and what is a trainer and how are they alike and how are they different. I personally joined Toastmasters because I was used to teaching and interacting and doing all of the sessions in a very engaging way where we're breaking out and doing activities, and it wasn't me just giving a speech. So being in the corporate world, I found myself having to deliver proposals, project updates, where giving a speech was more in that skill set that I did not have. Some people are the opposite, that they have other reasons for joining, but that was personally my why for joining Toastmasters. So hopefully we can all use each other's experience to get to where we want to go in terms of our goals that we would like to achieve. So like I said, this is a critique opportunity for an evaluation. If you want to have ongoing conversations with me or anyone else on the team, we would be happy to have those continual conversations to get geared up for the next TLI or for the next session or something that you're doing for some other platform. So I want to segue into Zoom. By a show of hands, how many of you have done training in a live, in-person classroom or conference room setting? All right, pretty much all hands go up. All right, how many of you have delivered training on Zoom? Okay, most of you. So let's talk a little bit about some Zoom considerations. We've already talked earlier about some things that you can do. You can use some different types of polling. You can even use the chat. But what are some things that we can do on Zoom to make this more interactive and engaging for the audience? And keep in mind what Nancy said earlier, that sometimes you're going to have some very experienced officers that this session isn't necessarily geared towards them. But how do we make this a session for everybody? So let me hear from you. Deb, please.
Well, one of the things that I like to do when I trained, and even in person, was make it a very interactive, like you're doing now. Ask, for instance, how many people have done this before? How many haven't? And then call on specific people throughout to give their experience. So this way, these more seasoned or more knowledgeable people are not bored because they're sharing.
Absolutely. And Toastmasters love to talk. I know this is news. This is news to you. Toastmasters love to talk. They love to hear themselves talk. I have a theory about Toastmasters. My theory is that this is where all the nerds in high school, this is their place to shine. Because maybe we weren't in the spotlight in high school. I know that was definitely the case for me, but this is like my time to shine. And use that. Use that, because as we talked about earlier with Schema Theory and Malcolm Knowles' adult learning theory, people have things to contribute. Use it. Use it. Anybody else have any ways to interact on Zoom? Vicki, please.
I really like people to have their cameras on and off. So just engaging them by saying, everybody turn your camera off. And I'm going to ask you some questions. When I ask you the question, turn your camera on, or turn your video on. So, and do it on and off, whether it's experience, whether it's an answer to a question, but it makes them realize that we're looking and helps you see who's there. Also, in reference to that other question about Toastmasters love to talk, that could be an evil force if you get somebody who is just really wanting to take over. So you have to have tools available and ready to say, thank you so much. And I can tell you a great resource, put your connection in the chat and we'll get more information later, or people can contact you or something. But there are people that are going to talk. You're going to have to be able to recognize those people early on, and they may not be your first the first person you call on for additional answers. So start watching who's talking too much and who needs to be jumping in.
That's absolutely right. Yep. And facilitation of that time and guarding your time to make sure that you accomplish your goal in it is really important. I'll go with Angela and then I'll go with Julie.
Cannot we put a time limit on their response? Like say, okay, everybody can, give me your advice, but you each get 1 minute. Or yeah, do a card or something like that. Yeah, I still have my cards from the our last conference. So yeah, if we stick a time limit on them, because I've had people just take over my meeting and it's just like, they won't stop talking for me to get in there, just like I'm doing right now to y'all. So give them a time limit.
You definitely can. Absolutely. Okay. I love that. And you can even turn it like kind of into like this is a fast round robin, fire away. Like you got 30 seconds and get it in there. Yeah, absolutely. Julie, please.
Yeah. I just tuned into a TLI training a few days ago on the West Coast, and they pointed it out, and that applies to what Vicki is saying, that they require to leave the Zoom picture on, because some people attend the mandatory training and they don't show their faces, they don't interact, and they expect to be checked off that they went through the training. That's not the way. So I just want to call your attention that we should incorporate this in the preliminary discussion of any training. Leave your face on this damn screen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things I want to talk about also is guarding your time, making sure you're accomplishing your goals, facilitating the conversation. And when you are sharing your screen and showing slides, that can be good for the participants to stay on track with the points that you're making, but it can inhibit you from seeing your participants. So if you have multiple screens, then you can spread out your screens, and that way you can still see your people's faces and you can see them raising their hand like Fred's doing right now, or any of the interactions. But what I would suggest if you are going to share slides is share them intermittently. Share a slide, talk about the slide, and then stop sharing and bring everybody back, because that inhibits everyone else's view of the whole group as well. So that's going to be one of my pro tips that I would like to share. I'm going to give it to Fred, and then we're going to wind down the session because we've just got a few minutes left. Fred, please.
I just wanted to make a couple of suggestions to Angela, because I did a speech in my home club the other day where I had audience engagement, and I was asking someone a question, and I asked the timer specifically. I said, I want you to time how long it takes you to answer it, because I was trying to make a point in communication as far as responding goes. What I was going to say maybe to Angela is maybe talk to the Zoom moderator and the timer and say, anybody that's answering my questions or anybody that's engaging, make sure that they're cut off at 1 minute or something like that. You know, like they may, you know, like you said, Toastmasters like to talk. They may see the red light and still keep talking. So maybe like Angela can maybe make it a point to tell the moderator, cut them off at a minute, even if they see they're cut them off, because it's her show. It's your show, Angela. I mean, that's my suggestion to her.
There's a question in the chat I want to address as well. Thank you, Fred, for that. That's really important content that you just shared with us. Question being, what's my viewpoint of selecting someone versus waiting for a response from the audience? Hey, you know, this is one of those skills that it depends on the audience. Some people in the audience are going to just take over your session if you just make it a free for all. And you kind of have to set the expectation up front and say, this is interactive, please unmute yourself, or you're going to interact using the chat or the reaction buttons. If you have a blank slide and you want to show them the annotate feature where they can type things in, or they could drop stars and symbols on stuff, set that expectation up front. Just as I told you guys, those of you who were here at the beginning, that, hey, this is going to be interactive. We're going to be chatting and talking stuff. So that's one of the things to think about. Other things in Zoom that came out of our last Train the Trainer that I would like to share with you was somebody offered asking the experienced officers their advice by just putting it in the chat. And somebody else had contributed to ask new officers to put their questions in the chat. And this way you're kind of hitting both. And if you have like a side dialogue in the chat where experienced people are chiming in, and just like in today's chat, we have some people saying like, hey, I learned this. This is a great tip. This is a great technique. Allow that. That's a big part of the guide on the side mindset versus the sage on the stage mindset. So those are some things that I wanted to share that came out of that. So one final link I want to share, and I'm going to repost all of these links in the chat simply because I know people have joined us all at different times and you don't get the historical chat. You only get what you got when you came into the Zoom room. You don't see what transpired before. This particular article came out of the November 2021 Toastmaster magazine. That the title is From Toastmaster to Trainer. And it's funny reading this article to me because my journey is the exact opposite. Mine is from trainer to Toastmaster, but that's not everyone's experience. So I encourage you to spend some time looking at some of these resources. We have the training basics that talks all about adult learning theory. And then we have the club officer materials that you are welcome to change and either reduce or add on to and pick and choose those files. The club officer materials also includes a facilitator guide. If you've never worked with a facilitator guide that matches a slide deck before, I'm here for that as well. I also added the article that I just mentioned, From Toastmaster to Trainer. I put those flashcards in there that talks about online engagement versus in-person engagement, guide on the side versus sage on the stage. And there's 4 different flashcards for you to look over. And then finally, the trainer evaluation. If you're interested in increasing your own training acumen, this is a layer of support that we're adding this year specifically for you that is not mandatory. This is something that you can opt to have one of us come into your session and give you an evaluation and debrief with you how well it went and maybe some suggestions to improve. As Vicki said before, evaluation is the heart of the Toastmasters program. You can also use it as a self-critique. And if you'd like to debrief with one of us on your findings, that's an option as well. So we have reached the end of our time. I just want to take a look at that chat. Where do we want to improve? Improving our training skills, how to engage the audience so we're not just speaking, encouraging discussion, creative ways, latest and greatest, expectations. So how is everybody feeling about what did you get out of this session? And are you feeling more confident in your training abilities and your preparation?
While everybody is thinking of that, may I just add, Rachel, that you all are going to be assigned at least one moderator. I know this is a question, at least one moderator, and we will probably have a traveling moderator going from room to room to take attendance if you don't have two. You will be given the contact information for your moderator, and we are going to have a little rehearsal session for on Tuesday evening. So if you are wanting to get together, but because you'll have contact information, you can also get together with your moderator, make sure you transfer to them any handouts, any presentations and so forth, so they can back you up how you want your timing, all of those sorts of things. We can get into that more in detail, but we'll be doing that at the rehearsal on Tuesday evening before the Wednesday session. And Sue will be sending that out this afternoon, that link.
Absolutely. And if you'd like to fill out that training evaluation on how I did today, I am here for it. Practice the tools. The rehearsal is not required, no. Anybody else?
So
Do
look
we
for a
contact-
message this afternoon. We'll be sending it out this afternoon with all the directions, all the schedules, all of that information. It'll be coming to you. So check that out.
May not come until tomorrow afternoon. Sorry, I'm a little,
Okay.
just in case.
All
And
right.
we're
Well,
still finalizing the schedule as well. We're still trying to fill holes on both presenters and moderators. It's so tricky in the summer because everyone is here, there, and everywhere, but we're doing our best to try and fill that in. So I do have the Wednesday, July 20 trainer schedule solidified. But once we solidify the moderator one as well, we'll send that out. So everybody has each other's contact information. Presenters, you can give your bio to the moderators and make sure that you have kind of a run of show together ahead of time.
you want to say something about introductions?
Yes, you can give your introductions to the Zoom moderator. In the meantime, if you just want to send it to me while you're thinking about it, I can collect those as well.
We ask that you please, we know you are wonderful and we know you have wonderful background and lots of things that are probably important about your history, your qualifications and so forth. But remember, you've only got about 40 minutes. So make sure your introduction is short and to the point. You only need a few sentences. We don't need to know every single thing. And you'll probably be giving some of that information throughout your presentation as well.
That's right. I want to thank everybody for coming. We're a little over time, and this is another resource for you. So please take advantage of it. Everyone has my email, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But let me put my cell in the chat. You're welcome to call me, text me, WhatsApp me. And if you want additional information about how to hijack those Toastmasters slides so you can actually edit them, I can help you there. If you want to talk over the trainer evaluation, I can help you there. So any resource that you need to be successful in your session, let us collaborate on making that the best session that it can possibly be for everyone.